All right, guys, welcome out to episode 3 of the Get Hunt Ready podcast. This is a really cool episode that we've got. We've got Blair Sandberg on with us. Blair met my dad through that hunting outfitter, Gary, with Circle Dot Outfitters down in New Mexico. And they've been hunting down there. Blair will go down there. My dad obviously guides down there, so he's down there all season. But Blair is pretty much, I don't know why you guys haven't hired him as a guide at this point for as much time as he spent down there on the ranch.
He knows it better than most people, even us.
Yeah, I think my dad threw out the number that you hunt like 21 days straight down there during archery season.
21, 24, somewhere around there. When's the last day of the season?
Yeah, however long you can get out down there legally, right? No, that's fun though, man. And every time that I talk to my dad, it seems like if we're talking about New Mexico, Blair's name always comes up. Blair's done a lot in the hunting industry, specifically in the archery industry. He went through and he developed the bee stinger stabilizer. And there's a story that I'll actually have Blair touch on here in a second. My dad always brings up is that when he was 18, he developed his own rangefinder before rangefinders were even a thing, through the scope on his rifle using the yardage on a football field so he could make sure he could figure out how far away his animals were and stuff. So he's just really smart, really intelligent with all this kind of stuff, and seems like everything that Blair's gotten into in the hunting industry, he's put his hand on and made sure that he left it better and made it easier for all of us to be able to do what we love. So we appreciate you coming out here, Blair, and spend some time with us today.
That's my pleasure. I wouldn't miss it. And hunting with your dad's about the funnest thing there is to do. So I appreciate the time we've been able to spend together.
Yeah, you guys.
Awesome.
I went down to New Mexico twice now with my dad. Once on my own bull elk hunt, where Gary and I were able to harvest a bull elk out of there, and then the other time I was just down there, we're just shooting prairie dogs, just target practicing and having fun. Man, there's always something good to do down there.
Yes.
So Blair, tell me a little bit about before we get into your stuff that you developed. Tell me a little bit about how you got into archery specifically, right? It sounds like you grew up hunting and kind of had that background, maybe from passed down from your family or something. But what led to archery and all that you've done with that?
Sure. Initially, I was young, following my dad out into the woods, hunting, and then a brother-in-law turned me on to archery. And so I got a bow. I lived down in San Diego at the time. I'd spent a lot of time at Balboa Park down there shooting. And then I met another friend who was a great bow hunter. He just, every day, he was out bow hunting. And we just would spend so much time that, I soon became addicted. And trying to get close enough to make a shot with the bow just became, I don't want to say an obsession, but let's just call it an obsession, right? It's just so much.
We'll take it.
People always ask, what do you prefer more with rifle or archery? And for me, it's archery because so much happens between, say, 400 yards and 40 yards. And,
Oh, yeah.
But you have to be willing to not get the animal in return for that experience, and that's worthwhile to me. So that's what kind of got me going in the early days with archery.
And so getting in, you got into archery hunting, right? And then there's been all of that. And then as of recent, we were talking just before we hit the record button here, is that you've been helping out with a couple of individuals, at least, with training for competitive archery. Did you ever get into competitive shooting yourself growing up, or is it just the expertise that you have that people sought you out afterward?
Oh, sure. So I did get into tournament shooting. I'd met another hunter that was a really competitive tournament shooter. And then a friend of mine that is an insurance person was telling me that for no other reason, tournament shooting is critical to develop a shot process and to get more arrows in. If you're going to go to a tournament next week, you're probably going to practice that much more. And when you get to the tournament, you're going to, to get better, you have to start working on your shot process and things of that nature. And so tournament archery became not only fun, but it became critical to developing a shot process and a mental game to hunting as well.
Hmm. So going through and doing a little bit of competitive, kind of just to hone your skills, it sounds like, for hunting. Um, was it at that point? Like you said, let's talk a little bit about that story with the rangefinder that you developed, right? With that rangefinder, I know you're using your rifle scope as you're doing that, but was that to judge just in any hunting situation, or was that like, hey, I need to be able to figure something out when I'm archery hunting?
Right. No, that was specifically for rifle hunting. And
Okay.
so at the time, there was a place in California that I was hunting deer in Zone D11, and I kept seeing certain certain buck come out and drink at this water that was a long ways away, and we were estimating between 500 and 700 yards, but that's just not good enough even with a 300 Win Mag. And so I wanted to figure out how to judge the distance. And I knew that it was a good size California Pacific hybrid deer. And I was about 18 at the time, and I'd just taken trigonometry, and I had realized that if I knew the height of that deer, I could line up my scope, the reticles, and work with my the power setting on my scope and figure out what its distance was. And so once again, necessity, right? The mother of all inventions. I had that desire and a hunger to see if I could solve that problem. And so a funny story behind that is I needed 100 yards, and so I went down. I was in San Diego at the time. I went down to Miramar High School to use their football field, where I could put a yardstick up on one end zone and go to the other end zone with my 300 Win Mag and start taking measurements. And I'm 57 now, and I'm kind of looking back. I'm kind of proud of the fact I called the police department to say, hey, just so you know, this Saturday I'm going to be at the football field with my hunting rifle taking measurements. And they asked, well, why are you even telling us? And I said, well, I'm guessing someone might call you when they see it. I'm not going to bring the bolt. There'll be no ammunition. They let their watch commander know in their dispatch, and no one showed up. But I spent like 4 hours down at the high school taking measurements back in whatever date that was.
Yeah, that was a lot more responsible than what I think anybody else in that situation would have done. They would have gone down there and had to fight the cops off and everything else. But that's funny. I think about like my hometown I grew up in. Like, there's not even a stoplight in my hometown, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And if you went out there with, even today, went out there with a gun, you'd have people jumping all over you. And everybody, I mean, we had guns under our seats and stuff when, in the high school parking lot all of a sudden, all the time. But even since I was in high school, I mean, I'm only 29. That's a big no-no now. All that stuff's changed. That's pretty funny though. So did you literally just like you say, talk about taking measurements and using the zoom on your scope? Did you like mark up your scope whenever you like, how did you track those measurements with that? Or was it just whatever power you were at?
Yeah, I had a cheat sheet, and so I don't remember the measurements at the time, but I was measuring from the brisket to the withers of a deer, and then I had kind of three different measurements for, or maybe two for a medium sized deer and a large sized deer, and I don't remember, it was like 27 and 29 inches or something like that. And a little bit of the problem is if you missed that measurement by much, you were going to miss your distance measurements. That's one of the reasons why I was taking those measurements, is to see how forgiving. When you look at a triangle, that would be the opposite wall. How forgiving is that opposite wall if you miss it on the adjacent wall, which is your distance out to the target? And so, but yeah, and then quickly after that, I was into archery hunting, and so yeah, I was onto the next project, shooting my bow and trying to get closer to animals and stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Did that ever translate at the time to archery hunting? Like, did you have like a little scope or something that you had all your dials with, or did it was it just you used for that situation?
No, with archery hunting at the time, the idea was you knew exactly. You were really good at 20 yards and maybe a second distance, but then you would, for me, I would add, or if I said that's 20, and then the deer looks like, or the pig or whatever is 10 yards past that, or another 20 and 10 past that. So I was usually estimating distances
Hmm.
off of that. But the I would cut yardage on up or downhill shots based on the same thing, which is the trigonometry or the cosine of the angle would give me. And I had several of those memorized, which I don't anymore. But I remember, 45 degrees was the cosine of that's like 0.72 or something, 0.75. So if
Hmm.
you had a 50-yard shot, it was you'd shoot it for like 35 yards. But now everything's in the rangefinder, and it's no big deal.
Yeah, we don't got to think as hard as what you had to back then, right?
You know, one other thing I did
Don't have
with
to
the
think
range
at all.
way back then, though, was I remember I was hunting pigs once up in Central California, and there was a beautiful hog about 40 yards out, standing broadside, and there's a big manzanita branch right over its back, but closer to me. And so I judged the distance, and I put the 40 on him, and I thought, I hope my arrow's going to miss that log, and I shot and I hit the bottom quarter of that log, and it was hardwood. It just stuck. And once again, there's a need now. I should know if I'm going to hit that log. If I'm going to shoot, how come I didn't know if I was going to hit it? And I quickly came to realize when I'm lasering an animal and there's a branch in the way, it only literally takes a second to go, 40 on the pig and 30 on the branch. And you go to full draw and you put your 40 on the pig. And if your 30's on that branch, you're going to hit it, right? You're just shooting the branch
Yeah.
for 30. And so now you can try to get down or come up and get that 30-yard pin clear and make a shot. But how many times have we made a shot with a bow and hit something in between us laying down? And that was something, in the mid to late 90s, I had figured that out, and that has been really effective, and still use that to this day. So
Well, I love hearing those stories because it's such a sophisticated, and like you said, like you're actually thinking through these processes. Like I think about myself at 18 years old. If I was out there, I probably would have just been like, stupid tree was in my way, like, okay, well, that tree was been there for how many years, right? Like you need to be able to think logically on, okay, what do I got to do? Like, what do I got to make changes to? Why was it in the way? How do I avoid it? All that kind of stuff. Like I love hearing like, oh, you're actually working through and thinking through that process, which like you said, just goes to show and show the experience and the knowledge that you have and all that kind of stuff with all the developments that you're able to bring forth after that, man. Super cool. I'm glad we got guys like you to figure that stuff out and tell me how to do it, because otherwise I'd be hitting trees all the time.
well, both of you, I know, and I know your dad for sure. It's just all about evaluating our epic failures. If you said, how do you get ready for the hunting season, I go over all my epic failures and I think, how do I avoid those this year, right?
Yeah.
So true.
Yep.
So true.
Yeah.
There's plenty of them to choose from too.
So Blair, let's change gears a little bit here and let's talk about your bee stinger stabilizer, right? So obviously you go through, you have a problem with your rangefinder, you fix it. You have a problem with the branch, you fix it, right? You've gone through and you're this guy that understands how to alleviate his problems. And you had a problem with stabilization on your bow, which led to this bee stinger. So tell us a little bit about that process.
Sure. Well, I was tournament shooting, and I was shooting in a class called Bow Hunter Freestyle Limited, and that just means I had my bow hunter bow, and I shot fingers. And I was competitive in that class, and you're always working on the next thing, the next problem, whatever it might have been back then. And so eventually I got to my stabilizer, and I just felt like my bow was a little loose when I was aiming. And at the time, bows were vibrating pretty hard in your hand when you shot them. They're starting to get a little bit better, but literally every single stabilization company was not stabilizing, but they were putting rubber products on their stabilizers to dampen vibration. And so I had gotten different components from some stabilizer companies and put something together that I thought should be pretty good. And it felt pretty good. And I literally just had an epiphany. I go, what am I doing? I need to go get my physics book out and see what describes stability or resistance to moment of inertia or rotational forces, which is moment of inertia. Fortunately, the math was really simple, and for me, I appreciate you, Darrel, earlier saying, or one of you said that I was really smart, and I don't think I know some really smart people that are just frightening to me, and what I think I was interested and motivated, right? And all of us, the attention to detail comes down to your motivation, whether it's doing homework in school or anything. And so I was motivated to figure out the stabilization, and I realized because of moment of inertia, it was critical to get the weight to the end of your stabilizer bar. If in a 12-inch class, in a bow hunter class, if I put weight at the 6th inch of the bar and then take that same weight and move it out to the 12th inch of the bar, it's 4 times more effective. And when I saw that, my question was, how do I get all the weight to the 12th inch to resist rotational forces? And so I thought I got to make a plate or a disc. And so that's what I ended up doing. I made this disc. It was horrific looking. People, I thought of naming it the ugly stick. I had people that were, that thing's too ugly for me to shoot. There was a fishing company that had the ugly stick, and so I didn't want to go there. But sometimes I regretted not naming it. But I made 12 of them, and I sent them out to the best bow hunter shooters in really the world. I sent some to New Zealand, around the United States. One person was under contract. He sent it back, said doesn't feel comfortable shooting it. The other 11 said they were. That guy shoots it today, by the way. But the other 11 were shooting scores they'd never shot in their lives, and right out of the gate. And they said, "I'm keeping it. I'll pay you for it, or I'll be on your shooting staff." And and then we were off to the races. In the first couple of years, there was about 200 world and national records broken with it. Just rewrote the record books in all the bow hunter classes. And so then it became a business after that. But it was just my own personal need to want to hold my sight picture a little more stable. And if my fingers came off the string a little wrong, I wanted that error to be mitigated some. So my bad shots wouldn't be quite so bad. That's what bore out, and that's what it turns out when people got a hold of it. That's what it bore out for them in the tournament world as well.
Well, you say that you don't feel like that smart of a person. You're just trying to fill necessities, but I think it takes a little bit of both to be able to figure stuff out like that and be able to rewrite all the record books. Man, you can't tell me you're not smart when you go through and do that. You break it.
I was motivated.
Yeah, which is great, right? It's just great.
Blair's humble too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's a really cool story. So yeah, obviously that went through and did a lot for competitive archery, but did a lot for hunting as well, right? Now it helps us to be able to get out there and plant those shots in the spots we need to be able to plant them and be able to drop those animal in a clean way and not have to go chasing blood trails and butcher up your meat a little bit more than what you probably should, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, it translates even better to hunting because, at the time we were mostly shooting fixed blade broadheads, and any air in your shot, any torque, anything like that, and that those wings on the front of your arrow were going to be exacerbated even worse, and your bad shot was going to be even worse. So we really wanted the bow to be less responsive to our airs. So it definitely translated to hunting as well.
Yeah. So obviously going through, and you said it was 11. Well, I guess all 12 by the end of it. We're shooting that, and that company just kind of blew up for you, and you got your name out there pretty good. Which I think is what you said before we hit the record button here, was that when you got out of that space and decided to move on to, I'm sure, bigger and better things within your own life, that you had people then reaching out to you to help train them and coach them on perfecting their shot, right? And it comes from, I assume, the name that you put out there with that bee stinger product, that everybody started to know about that, and all the expertise and obviously the knowledge that you had on how arrows fly and how bows work and all that kind of stuff.
Well, kind of is what happened was I ended up selling the company, and and it was a little bit rough, and I was ready to be out of the industry from a business perspective. So I just started mostly hunting, and I would go to a couple of local 3D tournaments because that's just, like I said before, it's just mission critical if you're serious about hunting. And so, but I would still get calls on stabilization. I was, definitely the stabilizer guy, and and then after that, well, during the stabilizer company and Bee Stinger, I ended up making a freestyle bar, and all of the top freestyle shooters came on board. And I spent a tremendous amount of time with the best shooters in the world. I'd be at the Olympic Training Center, all the freestyle shooters, and I'm always super interested in what they have to say. I've always got a bunch of questions, and these guys and girls that are performing at the top level are oftentimes tuning and shooting machines. They're dealing with incredible pressure. One arrow to win Vegas for up to $100,000, and you see people just coming apart on the line, or really battling with the mental side of their game. So I still was dealing a lot with stabilizer questions, but then oftentimes as we were dealing with that, I would be dealing with tuning or shooting questions as well. I just I wasn't into it, but I'm always happy to help wherever I can. And eventually, right now, I just work with one shooter who's a female that your dad's met, named Bella Otter, and she is phenomenal, and she's super motivated, and she's like the sweetest young lady you could ever meet. And she just is a sponge. She just wants to take it all in and figure it all out. So that's pretty rewarding working with her these days.
Yeah, for sure. So Blair, scenario here. If you had the mental, I don't want to say perfection, right? But you said it's a lot of mental game whenever you're hunting in any fathom, right? But especially hunting archery.
Yes.
If you could choose between just a bare, not great bow and having a perfect mental game versus a not perfect mental game and having a tuned in bow with your stabilizers and everything's all primed there, which of those two do you think that you would choose?
Yeah, that's a good question, but it's also a super easy question. The mental game is absolutely heads and tails the most important part, because you could have the greatest bow in the world, and if you're shaking so bad, your pin's on and off and on and off, or maybe if I could run an inside joke past your dad, you don't have the clips for your broadheads or something to hold them together. I mean, there's
Well, you
it's
got to expand on that now.
I would get
Wait, was that him that missed his clips on his broadheads?
no.
No.
Oh, well, Gary, when we talked to Gary last week, Gary brought up that my dad was trying to shoot an elk with his safety on. So they called him like safety man. I don't know what they call it, some safety thing.
we
So I'm learning all sorts of stuff about him.
we've all had. If you're I told my son and I were watching like a snowboarder, like Sean White or something. Someone had the most medals ever, and I go, you know what else that guy has the most of? And he goes, what's that? And I go, phenomenal crashes and failures. And you show me a great hunter, and I'll show you someone that's done like the dumbest thing ever with an animal multiple
Right.
times, but they learned from it, right? And so, and I've been there. I mean, the mental game is so critical, it doesn't matter how good the bow is. If I can't get inside that bow and relax and get control of my mind, you know, I might miss that animal by feet. It's going to, the pin's going to be on, going to be off, on, off, on, off. I'm going to be thinking about timing the shot, and I'm going to be in panic mode. It's going to be disastrous. But if I can take, you know, a store bought shelf bow and get some cheap arrows and just give me a few minutes working on it, so I kind of know where the arrow is going to go, and I can settle in and relax and get control of my mental game. I There's just no question I take that every single time.
So what are the different aspects of a mental game? Is it just relaxation, or is it what?
Yeah, I was telling Bella, the shooter that I work with, that the mental game is a perishable skill, just like the physical or the shooting side of that game. And so for me, it's having a single thought process that I have to work on. Just aiming. The best shots I've ever made on animals were shots where, when I went to full draw, I literally said to myself, I'm not shooting this arrow. I'm just going to see what my bow's offering me today. And I would get inside the bow. I would go through my process. My bow hand's pushing right for the target with about 2 pounds. I'm pulling back my elbows, everything's in alignment, coming straight apart. All the pressure's on my skeleton, and I'm just looking. All I'm thinking about is aiming. My thumb's on the trigger, and when it's sitting there, I'm usually amazed. I'm going, wow, this is incredible. I wonder what happens if I just put a little pressure on this shot, and then the shot breaks by surprise, almost, not on accident, but just what happens if I put a little pressure on. And when those shots break and your pin's just sitting there, you just know. If the animal doesn't do something strange by the time the arrow gets there, you're just going to be, I'm going to be completely proud of that shot. And that's what I want to do. I want to shoot a shot that I'm proud of. And if I'm in full panic mode and I'm shaking and I jump and pull my head out and I happen to hit it, for me, that's not satisfying. I could tell a great story, but deep down, I'm like, I was a miserable wreck, and it's
Right.
not right.
Lucky shot.
Now, this is after years also of experience, because if that was the first animal I ever shot, it'd be the greatest thing ever still. So, having that desire to have that mental game in check and shoot a shot that you're proud of is is where is where it's at for me. That's the most important thing. And I'll always shoot better if I have a good mental game over a good bow. If it's one or the other, for sure it's the mental game.
So having like a prime mental game to you, does that mean, okay, I've got these checks that I go through whenever I'm in the moment, right? The
Right.
bull, the deer, whatever comes out, and I say, okay, I take my draw, I got my breast down, I've got, my pressure on my front hand, my pressure on my backhand. All do you have this process, or is it more of my mental game is taken care of before I'm in that situation where I've run so many reps that that's just second nature for me?
Yeah, no, the reps, I would say, is the physical game. So I have a physical game where I have to address my bow hand in the bow while the bow's vertical and the bubble's in the middle before I start to go to full draw, because you get side hill and you see people go to full draw and their bubbles off, and then they try to correct it, and then as they start to expand and make their shot, you'll see them lose the bubble before it goes. So there's a process that I definitely want to be able to trust and rely on. But the mental game is more this, and I'll give you an example with Bella. um, Sometimes Bella will tell me, she goes, in the old days, she goes, I just want to win so bad. And that it creates anxiety and stress for her. And I would tell her, I would say, Bella, if you show up to an archery tournament and one of the other top shooters just shoots lights out, there's nothing you can do about controlling winning or losing. Is what you can do is work through that process, trust in your shot, and then know that the highest value of what you're trying to obtain is a shot that you're proud of. And if you shoot a shot that you're proud of and you put all your shots together, you're going to shoot literally the best score you can shoot. And then if victory's on the table, it will come your way. But if it's not, you can walk away from that tournament proud that you put your best game together for that weekend. So it's a paradigm shift in what's important. Um, Making that shot on that animal, or and having the arrow hit right where you want it to hit, or shooting a shot that you're proud of. There was several over a decade ago when I was shooting fingers. I had several great opportunities at local bucks, and I had developed a problem where I wanted to see it so bad. I was shooting fingers that as I was here and starting to pull through my shot, just as the shot broke, I'd pull my head out to watch that arrow. And that would cause my arrow to fly high and to the right. And I had three great Pacific hybrid deer that I did that to. And because my highest is what I wanted was I wanted to see that arrow hit the deer right where I wanted to hit it. And that was so important that, my shot was breaking down and I was too excited and I wanted to see it. And I finally got so frustrated that I determined that I would rather not see the arrow, just focus on my target and shoot a shot that I'm proud of. And if I never saw the arrow, I could live with shooting a great shot and missing. I could live either way. But when you're like bummed for a year until you make up for it, I would be bummed for a year if when that deer comes and hits my stupid button and I can't do anything right, and I shoot a shot that I pull out of or do something. I'm just shaken and the nerves. I'm all wound up from the moment. So um, it's a paradigm shift in what's important. And the important thing for me is to get to full draw and just aim and see how long can I hold my pin in the kill zone, whatever I'm considering the kill zone is, in that area where I want the arrow to strike. And it's just a game for me. How long can I hold it there? And if I, with no intentions of shooting, because I have the intentions of shooting, things get crazy.
Hmm.
And then when it is sitting there, then I go, okay, well, let's see if I can put a little pressure on this shot and still hold this aim. And that's kind of how I treat my mental game, um, which is different than just the process in and of itself. Because I could shoot the process all day long, but then when you get that animal that you've been hunting for a year or two to step out in front of you, as you know, it's just a whole different ball game. So
Right. One thing that I love about that thought process too, Blair, is that I'm a big advocate for people taking personal responsibility for their actions and for what's happening, right? Like, as a very minimal example, I was playing pickleball the other day with a bunch of friends, and the wind was blowing really hard, right? There's four of us on the court playing, and one kept hitting it into the net and kept complaining, oh, the wind's messing me up. It's the wind's fault. It's the wind's fault. It's the wind's fault. And the rest of us were all doing that too, right? And we just adjusted the way that we hit the ball according to the wind. But the same thought process you've got here, if you're going through and you're focusing on making the best shot that you can, you're taking personal responsibility for where that arrow lands, whether it hits or it doesn't, right? If it doesn't hit, you're not, oh man, like a rabbit came out and spooked the deer, or the wind was blowing and did this or whatever. You're like, that was me, right? That was
yeah,
my fault. I'm going to take personal responsibility for this. And I think that that's where progress comes in any aspect of life, right? And especially in hunting, where you can come through and you can say, look, I know that I'm proud of that shot. It missed or, whatever, but I'm proud of the shot that I took there. I take responsibility for that miss. And now you go through and you can calculate that to be able to land a more accurate shot next time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is, if I shoot a shot that I'm proud of, if we could quantify that, 9 out of times, the results are going to be what I really want, which is a
Hmm.
clean harvest, something that's quick, right in the X ring. And but sometimes just as you shoot, the animal jumps up on a rock, and there's just unfortunate timing. But if I'm pulling out and yipping or trying to look or jumping or hammering the trigger, whatever the case might be, those results are way lower, maybe 30%. Plus, there's going
Sure.
to be some bad shots and some injuries. So the transition is going from I want to harvest this animal to I want to shoot a shot that I'm proud of. Because if I can focus on shooting a shot that I'm proud of, thank you, Frank Pearson, I will get that end result. Like Bella will never win a tournament if she goes there going, I just want to win. I just want to win. Well, she might win one or two, but it's not going to be as satisfying if she goes, I'm going to shoot shots that I'm proud of. I'm going to shoot shots that if people are watching me, they're going to go, wow, that shot was really well executed. Now, if the win is in her future, she's put herself in position to receive it. So
Yeah.
I
Man, I
just,
love that. I love that, dude. Thanks so much, Blair, for coming on here. I really, that's a, everybody listening. That's not just advice for hunting, man. Like that's just some just pure, genuine life advice, right? Appreciate it.
yeah, we have to evaluate it and hold ourselves accountable and try to learn from it. It's the only way we move forward, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, Blair, I don't want to take a whole lot more of your time here, but I mentioned before, and I can make some assumptions as to what your answer is going to be to this based on what we've talked about here. But our whole goal with this podcast and all that we're working on at Hunt Ready is to help people to prepare themselves for hunting season, for harvesting animals, for whatever, there's a million different things that come as far as preparation for a hunt, right?
Sure.
So if you were able to leave our listeners with one bit of advice on if there's one thing that they could do to prepare themselves to be hunt ready, what would that be?
Well, for me, it would come back to that mental game. When you're practicing shooting, you have to have a process that's in place that's going to hold you together mentally. And because when that animal that maybe is your first ever or your biggest or whatever the case might be that gets your adrenaline going kicks in, you have to have a process for that. And there's a ton of information out there on the mental side of shooting, whether it's pistols or rifles or archery, and you need to find something that works for you. There's a lot of important things out there, but I would take that. I'd rather go hunting and blaze orange and tennis shoes or something than in a bow that's not the best, like you said, than not have my mental game ready. It's just paramount to me. I think it's the
Yeah,
key to success, right?
for
You
sure.
have to do
So as
all
a follow up to that, do you have any bits of advice to anybody? And you may not, and that's fine. Any bits of advice to anybody on how do you start to find your mental control? Everybody's different, right? Like how you prepare mentally for a hunt is going to be different than every other person, right? Yours it sounds like you're coming through and saying, "Hey, I'm just here trying to hold my target. What happens if I put a
sure.
little pressure on that?" Right? Like that may work for some people, it may not. Do you have any bits of advice of how to find that?
Well, yeah, you're going to have to find out what it is that works for you. But there are some things that I think are reoccurring. There's a term called target panic. And talking with Frank Pearson, he says there's not really target panic, it's called distance panic. And so, because we can take a target that you struggle shooting with a bow, say at 40 yards, and move it up to 10 yards, and you're not going to have a problem. And so you always want to try to aim on a target. And there's also a paradigm shift in the early days when my pin got on the target, I would get excited going, there it is, there it is, there it is. And I'd have to realize, like, why am I excited when my pin's on the target? That's where I actually want it. That's where good things happen. I should be more excited when it's not there. But so is what I do is I just practice aiming. There are times where I'll just go to full draw and just try to relax and hold that pin in the yellow, in the dot, on the orange, in the kill zone, for 15 or 20 seconds. And I might just practice without my thumb on the trigger, but just practice putting pressure on it and really paying attention to my anxiety level and making sure that I'm calm. Just let the tension run out. Um, Sometimes, however, you have to just get so frustrated with failure that you will just go, I don't care what it is. I never want to experience that again. Like me pulling my head out of the shot to watch the arrow fly on a nice deer. Whatever that is so horrific. I don't want that to ever, and I'm hyperbolic with the word horrific, but I just don't want to ever experience that again. And so I know that I won't, because that's just a terrible feeling to pull your head out to watch the arrow and watch the arrow, fly 3 feet over the deer's back. So um, whether it's ground squirrel hunting or the prairie dogs, you can practice that there as well. Don't get the full draw thinking you have to shoot right away. Get the full draw and just see how well you can hold on it. And then when the tension runs out of your body and you're holding well, start to expand and shoot. That's the type of practicing I do. But then there's a lot of things that change, and that's where you might get a coach that's good with target panic. You're getting stuck below the target or above the target or whatever the case might be, and those are different solutions as well. But trying to figure out how to relax at full draw while your pin's sitting where you want it to be, and that paradigm shift of what's important. And what's important is shooting a shot that you're proud of, not actually harvesting the animal. Because if you shoot a shot you're proud of, that will lead to harvesting the animal. It's the causation of harvesting the animal, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I would say is practice aiming, and when all systems are green to go, see if you can get to that trigger without losing your mind.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Blair. Like I said, I think that there's a lot of valuable information that can be taken away from our conversation today. A lot of information that I need to go put into practice as well. I was just talking with my dad. The bow that I'm shooting is a bow that my dad handed down to me a long time ago. I've shot some good deer with it before, but I just haven't shot consistently in like 2 years, and so I'm just getting back into it and got a little range of stuff set up. So
Sure.
yeah, if nobody else finds value from this, I know that I definitely have, and things that I can implement to sharpen my game on my mental capacity in that as well. So I really appreciate your time here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I hope it's helpful. So it's good to see you guys, and hopefully
Yeah,
I'll
for
see you,
sure.
Darrel.
Likewise.
You got anything to close out here, Dan?
No, no, it's always a pleasure listening to Blair. He's always full of some awesome information.
No. Well, thank you again, Blair. We're going to go ahead and sign off here today, but I think lots of good bits of hunting advice, bits of shooting and archery advice, and some bits of life advice that we can all take out here too to go implement and sharpen our skills in all different fronts. So appreciate your time. We'll turn it off here.
Good. Thanks. All the best.